r/AskReddit. Hikers, campers, and hunters of Reddit. What is the most creepy/unexplained thing you've experienced in the wild? Went camping with 2 friends back in 2011. At the time I lived in a rural area which is pretty much in the border of the Amazon jungle. We set up camp under some mango trees near a deserted road and take the first day to explore our surroundings. Night comes and it starts to rain. One of my friends forgot his tarp back home, and since his tent wasn't waterproof we had to share mine. We wake up in the night hearing a calf cry. Sure, there were some properties nearby, and it wasn't that uncommon that the cattle would roam around. Then we paid attention. Whatever was making that noise was directly above us. It was coming from up the mango tree. I was living in Brazil and a friend and I decided to do a one night out and back through mountainous rainforest terrain in one of the southern states. We mostly wanted to get some exercise and do a gear check before going on a longer trip in Patagonia. The experience started out really tough. We were doing almost constant climbing and it was hot. Humidity was near 100% through lush vegetation. Eventually we were pretty much in clouds and completely drenched from sweat and humidity. It was kind of hellish, soaked to the bone with no chance of drying out. Fortunately, at that altitude it gets below freezing frequently at night, so there weren't many insects or animals, only birds. We hiked for probably 8 hours with little progress. It was slow going through tough terrain. At early evening we came to a flat spot, the first we'd seen in hours, and decided to make camp as it was starting to pour. I basically made camp in several inches of standing water. I was beat anyways, so I just sat in my tent reading. Around 3 AM I woke to a girl singing in the distance. The singing kept coming closer until she was singing right at our tents. She pushed past us and the singing drifted off. She was singing maybe a lullaby or children's song about rain in Portuguese, but it sounded very strange. An hour later, I got woken up to the singing in the distance again. She was coming back towards us, singing the same rain song. As she passed us, I could hear a little exasperation in her voice. She continued singing and went back in the direction of the trailhead. Another hour later, I was again woken up by her singing as she was again coming back towards us, except now she was also crying. She continued to cry and sing as she moved past us for the final time. We woke up that morning, looked at each other, said what the F was that, and then got on our way. It was very eerie at the time, and I don't have an explanation for it. We were in an extremely isolated location and the trail was definitely only used by recreational hikers, so I really can't say why this woman was out wandering, singing, and crying at 3 AM. I went camping in Southeast Ohio once with my dad and sister miles from civilization. As it started to get dark my dad and I started to prep food for the fire while my sister went to change in her tent. A couple minutes later she walks over to me and asks, "Were you outside my tent?" I asked her why and she tells me that someone walked out from the direction of the trees to her tent and placed their hand on the wall of the tent. She smacked the hand away thinking it was me messing with her, but when she came out no one was there. We tell my dad and he says he did it and left it at that. The problem there was I knew it wasn't him because I was with him the whole time. Later that night I asked him why he lied and he told me it was too late to go home, so there's no sense in scaring my sister when there's nothing to do about it. I stayed in my sister's tent that night with a knife in hand and didn't sleep. We stayed for another night without incident, but I couldn't get my mind off of the fact that we weren't alone. I have this nifty little hammock tent thingy that I camp. It's a canvas hammock with a weatherproof shell that you can't see out of, and one time, one of the flaps to my hammock just started going crazy like a cat was pawing at it the way they do at doors they want out of. So I play it off as the wind, but then realize there's no wind. So I just go try and close my eyes, and it happens again 2 minutes later. So this time I think to myself it's probably a raccoon, and I smack the side of my tent, and then all of a sudden I hear some heavy footprints running away after I smack my tent. That was one of the closest times I had come to crapping myself, so I just keep laying there for like an hour before coming to the conclusion that whatever was bugging me is gone. I fall asleep. Next morning when I wake up and look around and see some weird looking footprints, like many bear tracks would be the closest I can think of, but the weird part is they're only around my hammock and there's no tracks leading up to my tent, but there's tracks leading away. Still don't know what that was, but I only stayed at that site for one night. Likely one of the worst things I have ever experienced. Senior year of high school, a friend and I went camping in a canyon in the Texas Panhandle. Knew a park ranger, so we got in through a back way and took some quads to a remote campsite and set up. We cook some food and head into the tent and I doze off. I wake up to the fire going and can see a shadow of a person around it. I roll over and my friend is right next to me still. We both stare at each other and jump up and out of the tent, and as we do, someone or something took off running through the canyon. You could tell our stuff had been gone through, as if they were looking for something specific. No valuables were taken, the quads were fine, wallet, camera, all there. Still don't know who it was or why they did it, but it is still the scariest thing I have ever experienced in my life. We weren't camping, but were at the beach by my house. We had a fire going and were drinking beer and listening to music. This was around midnight or so. We live outside the city, so it's not completely dark outside. You can see the lights from downtown and such. Well, we hear what sounds like a helicopter, which is not uncommon. We also see the lights from it. All of a sudden the lights go out, but we can still hear it. It passes right in front of us, but we cannot see it. Like no shadow of it on the horizon or anything. We kept looking for it, but it was not there. We looked at each other and were like, where the hell is it? We were convinced it was some kind of reflective camouflage on the helicopter that acts like a mirror, or they were pulling some kind of prank on us, because we were the only ones out there that night and they could see us through night vision. Totally creeped us out. My mom tells this story often. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard it for 23 years. She and two other friends were drinking and driving. I know. This was the late 70s in South Carolina on back dirt roads. They all had to pee, so they stopped. She said she went kinda deep into the woods away from her friends because she had had 3 beers and didn't want them hearing her pissing like a horse. She said she had just squatted to pee when she felt like she was being watched. She said it was pitch black and sobered up instantly. Finished peeing and started to walk back to the truck when she heard crashing behind her like trees falling over. She glanced back and huge orange eyes. Of course she started to run. By the time she made it back to the other two, they were freaking out, screaming her name to make sure she was okay. They heard trees breaking and earth ripping. They all leap into the truck. I was camping and I woke up in the middle of the night to some growling. I looked outside my tent and I swear to God I saw eyes. It was pitch black. I just stared at the eyes. They didn't blink or anything. When my eyes adjusted, there was this massive bear about 10 feet away from me just staring. I was so scared I grabbed a stick I had been whittling the end like a spear point and just sat there. After about 5 minutes it just walked away. I left the campground early and have never returned. I will never forget that. It still makes me shudder at the memory. My old man was an avid outdoorsman in the Colorado Rockies in the late 80s. He'd go on week-long treks with his buds. One summer they'd been out for a few days in Pikes National Forest. They set up camp in a ravine they thought was safe. That night my dad unzipped the tent to take a leak in the dark, and outside stood a pair of pale bare feet. My dad screamed and zipped up the tent. Everyone else woke up and asked what was wrong. My dad said someone was barefoot out there. They went out and flashed their lights for a bit, hollering. My dad swore he saw what he saw and described the feet in detail. They were old blotchy feet. One even had a lump on the ankle. Tony, his bud, asked which foot, left or right. My dad said it was the right. Then Tony said they needed to move their camp immediately. Dad asked why. Tony said they didn't have time. They went along with it and packed up and moved on top of the hill. The next morning they woke up to find a flash flood had torn through the ravine during the night. It would have surely killed them. Tony's grandfather had just died a month prior, and one of the last things he said to him was that he would always watch over him. The feet my dad described reminded Tony of his grandfather's very feet. My dad is highly religious. Supernatural or not, someone's visions of paranoia saved their lives that night. My friends and I are avid duck hunters. We run a local run off of major river all the time. One morning we were heading out on the river, 4 guys in 2 separate boats. We were running ahead of the other guys who were roughly 3 to 4 minutes behind us. We have the boat running pretty fast. Multiple lights on the front and sides. Also working a spotlight in the front. It's 2 AM and pitch black. All of a sudden the guy running his spotlight yells that something is up on our right. We slow down and spotlight an older houseboat just floating along. Never seen anything out there before like this, and it's pretty shallow water. We do a 1 over and keep going to our spot because it's first come first serve. Guys behind us said they saw us slow down but didn't see why. They thought we had run across a log or sandbar in the river, so they tried to slow down in the same spot but never found the houseboat. They didn't believe us until on the way back when we ran across a huge debris field on the way back to the boat ramp. The water was roughly 5-6 feet deep and no sight of the houseboat. Just a weird ordeal for us. Thank you for watching. Like the video and leave a comment if you enjoyed. If you are new here, subscribe to the channel, follow on Twitter and Reddit, and join the Discord so you never miss a video.